A nuclear bomb is one of the most powerful and destructive inventions ever created by humans. And understanding how it works requires looking at the science inside the atom, but only from a high, non-technical, purely informational perspective. At the heart of every nuclear weapon is the idea that the nucleus of an atom contains an enormous amount of energy. This energy normally stays locked away, but under certain conditions it can be released in a sudden burst. When this release happens in an uncontrolled way, the result is a nuclear explosion. There are two major scientific processes behind nuclear weapons: nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, and modern designs often combine both. Fission is the process of splitting heavy atomic nuclei. Fusion is the process of forcing light atomic nuclei to combine. Both processes release far more energy than any chemical reaction, which is why nuclear weapons are vastly more powerful than conventional explosives. In a nuclear bomb that works through extremely heavy atoms, typically uranium-235 or plutonium-239 are used because their nuclei are large and fragile. When a nucleus of one of these atoms absorbs a stray neutron, it becomes unstable and splits into two smaller nuclei, releasing heat, light, radiation, and several more neutrons. Those newly released neutrons can hit other nearby nuclei, causing them to split as well. This creates what scientists call a chain reaction, a rapid sequence of atomic splits happening in fractions of a second. In a peaceful nuclear power plant, this reaction is carefully controlled to release energy slowly. But in a nuclear bomb, the reaction is deliberately uncontrolled and extremely fast, producing energy millions of times stronger than ordinary explosives. The key scientific concept behind a fission bomb is that once the chain reaction starts in the right conditions, it becomes self-sustaining and grows exponentially, meaning the energy release becomes unbelievably huge in an instant. Fusion-based nuclear weapons, often called thermonuclear or hydrogen bombs, follow a different scientific principle. Instead of splitting heavy nuclei, they use enormous heat and pressure to force light nuclei, usually isotopes of hydrogen, together. When two of these light nuclei fuse, they create a larger nucleus and release even more energy than fission does. However, fusion cannot start on its own. It requires temperatures hotter than the center of the sun and pressures greater than those found deep inside stars. To achieve these extreme conditions on Earth for even a fraction of a second, a powerful fission explosion is used first. So, a fusion bomb actually begins with a small nuclear fission explosion inside it, which produces the momentary heat and pressure needed to ignite the fusion reaction. Once the fusion begins, the energy output multiplies dramatically, making a thermonuclear weapon far more powerful and destructive than a simple fission bomb. Beyond these basic scientific principles, the operation of a nuclear weapon involves numerous complex systems, including conventional explosives, radiation reflectors, shielding, timing systems, and safety mechanisms, all of which require specialized engineering found only in highly regulated military environments. Importantly, these internal systems are deeply classified and strictly controlled for global safety and security. When a nuclear device detonates, the explosion produces several deadly effects. The blast wave is the immediate shock wave that moves outward faster than the speed of sound. It flattens buildings, topples trees, shatters concrete, bends steel, and throws debris across long distances. This blast wave is responsible for much of the structural destruction seen in nuclear test footage and historical bombings. Along with the blast wave comes thermal radiation, which appears as an intense flash of light and heat. Temperatures near the detonation point can exceed those of the sun's surface for a brief moment, igniting fires, melting materials, and causing severe burns miles away. The flash is so bright that it can temporarily or permanently damage eyesight even from a distance. Another effect is ionizing radiation, which consists of high-energy particles released during the nuclear reactions. This radiation can be very dangerous to living organisms, potentially damaging cells, tissues, and DNA. While some radiation is released immediately during the explosion, some can linger in the environment depending on conditions. If the explosion occurs near the ground, it pulls large amounts of soil, dust, and debris upward into the rising hot air, creating the iconic mushroom cloud. The cloud forms because the intensely heated air resists rapidly, expanding and drawing cooler air, smoke, and particles upward. As the rising column of hot air slows, It spreads outward, forming the cap of the mushroom. This cloud can carry radioactive particles, although the long-term environmental effects depend on altitude, weather patterns, and the type of weapon used. Airburst detonations, which occur high above the ground, create less radioactive fallout, but more widespread blast effects. Ground bursts, on the other hand, create more radioactive contamination because they collect debris from the ground into the cloud. Inside a nuclear weapon, an enormous amount of planning and safety measures exist to prevent accidental detonation. Nuclear-armed nations use isolated components, coded locks, environmental sensors, and special fail-safes that ensure such weapons cannot function unless specifically authorized under strict protocol. The complexity and secrecy surrounding nuclear weapon design highlight how dangerous they are and why the international community places strong emphasis on preventing the spread of nuclear materials and technology. Many global treaties, including the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, and various test ban agreements, exist to minimize the risk that nuclear weapons will be developed, tested, or used by more nations. Scientists, engineers, and governments continue working toward better safety standards, disarmament efforts, and international cooperation to prevent nuclear conflict. Understanding how nuclear weapons work on a high level is important not to teach construction, which is impossible without access to highly classified knowledge, but to understand why the world handles them with extreme caution. A nuclear explosion is not just a more powerful version of a normal explosion. It represents a fundamental release of energy from within atoms, altering matter at the most basic level. The effects can shape the environment, influence geopolitics, and determine the safety of nations. This is why discussions around nuclear weapons always emphasize responsibility, control, and the hope that they will never be used in conflict again. At a scientific level, nuclear bombs demonstrate the immense energy locked inside the building blocks of the universe. At a human level, they remind us of the importance of peace, diplomacy, and global cooperation. While the physics behind nuclear reactions, fission and fusion, is a legitimate field of study used in energy production, medicine, and research, the weaponization of that science shows the dual nature of human innovation. It has the power to create and the power to destroy. Learning about nuclear bombs from a broad scientific standpoint helps us appreciate why they are so heavily restricted, why safety and treaties are essential, and why their use would have consequences far beyond the immediate explosion. Ultimately, the story of nuclear weapons is not only about technology, but also about responsibility, ethics, and the ongoing global effort to ensure that such destructive power is never unleashed again.